As the sun began to dip behind the rolling hills, the sky shifted into a soft watercolor of lavender, deepening blues, and hints of gold that shimmered against the clouds. In a quiet corner of the countryside stood a humble little cottage. Its windows glowed warmly, casting rectangles of light across the neat stone path and the patches of wildflowers that nodded in the evening breeze. Just outside, Cinderella swept the front steps, the bristles of her broom whispering against the worn stone. Her simple linen dress swayed around her ankles, the fabric faded but clean, cared for as best as hands could manage. Strands of her soft honey-colored hair had escaped from her braid, catching the breeze and the last golden rays of sunlight. Despite the hum of crickets and the distant hoot of an early owl, the air felt still, like the world itself was pausing. Her hands worked rhythmically, but her eyes often wandered to the horizon, where stars began to peek from the velvet sky. In those quiet moments, her thoughts drifted, wondering, as she often did, if life held something more than these familiar chores and gentle routines. Her little animal friends, birds perched on the fence and mice scurrying near her feet, seemed to sense her mood. One small mouse stood on its hind legs, watching her with tiny black eyes that shone like beads. They were always there, silent companions in her quiet world. And yet, there was no bitterness in her heart. Just a deep, steady well of hope, tucked away like a secret wish. Inside the cottage, the atmosphere was a whirl of bustle and clamor. Her stepsisters, Anastasia and Drizella, spun around each other, holding fabrics against themselves, arguing over which dress was grander or which ribbon brought out their eyes. Their voices rose and fell like a chaotic duet, sharp and demanding. "Mother, where is my necklace?" Drizella shrieked. "I told you, I'm wearing it," Anastasia snapped. Their mother, the Lady Tremaine, sat by the mirror, arranging the feather in her hat with precise fingers and an expression as smooth and cold as marble. Cinderella moved quietly between them, a shadow against their noise, tending to tasks they barely noticed, fetching pins, finding shoes, adjusting sashes. Her hands were skilled and graceful, her presence gentle. Yet her gaze often flickered toward the fire crackling in the hearth. It wasn't escape she sought there, but comfort, the comfort of something steady, something warm. As they prepared for the royal ball, their excitement filled the air, but Cinderella's thoughts wandered to the idea of music and laughter. What must it feel like, she wondered, to dance beneath chandeliers, to step into a world where no one knew her as the girl who cleans, but simply as someone, herself. She sighed softly, letting herself imagine it, just for a moment, as the fire cast soft shadows against the stone walls. Once the household emptied, silence returned, wrapping around the little cottage like a velvet blanket. Cinderella stepped into the garden, where moonlight draped itself over leaves and flowers like silver lace. Her heart ached just a little as she looked up at the stars. "If only," she whispered, "if only for just one night." As if the stars themselves heard her quiet plea, the air shimmered. A swirl of soft blue light spiraled from the shadows, gathering like mist before forming into the figure of a kind, radiant woman. The fairy Godmother. Her presence didn't startle. Instead, It felt like a gentle wave of warmth washing over the garden. Her robes shimmered with flecks of silver and pale blue, like pieces of the night sky stitched into cloth. "Well now, child," the fairy godmother said, her voice soft and musical. "Why the tears?" Cinderella blinked, amazed yet comforted, as if she'd always known this was possible, somehow. "I just wished." "And a lovely wish it is," the fairy godmother smiled, tapping her wand to her chin thoughtfully. "A wish like that deserves a bit of magic, don't you think?" Behind them, the pumpkin on the garden path trembled slightly, as if sensing its destiny. Nearby, the little mice peeked from behind a watering can, whiskers twitching with curiosity. With a graceful sweep of her wand, the fairy godmother's magic spun into the air, soft and glowing, more like moonlight than fire. The pumpkin trembled, lifted, and stretched until it unfolded into an elegant carriage, its gold wheels catching the starlight. The mice scurried forward eagerly, transformed into white horses so graceful that their manes seemed spun from clouds. The garden lizard, ever watching from beneath a leaf, blinked and suddenly stood as a coachman, tipping his little hat with pride. Then the fairy godmother turned to Cinderella, eyes twinkling. "Now for you, my dear." The gentle sparkles gathered around her, rising from her worn shoes to her shoulders, swirling into her dress. The fabric shimmered, changed, and flowed like liquid light, cascading down in layers of soft blue, silver, and frost-pale silk. Her sleeves sparkled like morning dew, her bodice like the inside of a seashell, her shoes glass. Perfect, delicate, yet sturdy in the way only magic could make possible. Cinderella gasped softly, spinning once, watching the skirt float around her like a breath of air. Her eyes filled with wonder, not just at the beauty of it, but at the feeling, the sudden weightlessness of hope becoming real. "Remember, dear," the fairy godmother said kindly, "this magic lasts only until midnight. After that, well, things will return to as they were." Cinderella nodded, still breathless. "Thank you. Thank you so much." The carriage wheels turned gently over the cobbled path as Cinderella journeyed toward the palace. The moon hung bright above, silver clouds drifting lazily past. The countryside blurred by, quiet villages, whispering woods, fields aglow with a faint shimmer of dew. Inside the carriage, Cinderella pressed her hands to the window, her face softly illuminated by the moonlight. Her heart thumped gently but not wildly. It was excitement, yes, but also a quiet kind of joy, like stepping into a dream she had barely dared to imagine. For the first time in as long as she could remember, no one called her. No one demanded her presence for chores, errands, or complaints. She was simply herself. Whoever that was, she was ready to find out. The horses trotted gracefully, their hooves striking the stones like a rhythm, steady and comforting, carrying her toward a night unlike any before. The palace loomed ahead, grand and glowing, every window flickering with the warm light of 1,000 candles. Music floated through the open doors, the lilting rise and fall of violins and flutes blending with laughter and gentle conversation. Cinderella stepped from the carriage, her slipper touching the marble steps. As she entered the ballroom, a hush seemed to ripple through the crowd. Not of shock, no, something quieter. Curiosity, admiration, a sense that something wonderful had just begun. And there, across the room, stood the prince. Their eyes met, and the space between them disappeared in everything but distance. The prince offered his hand, not with pomp, not with royal arrogance, but with a gentle, honest smile. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Cinderella curtsied, her voice soft but steady. "Yes, I'd like that very much." The world melted away. They moved together in a graceful rhythm, their steps light as air. Her gown flowed like liquid starlight. His eyes never left hers. Around them, the guests blurred into golden shapes beneath the grand chandelier, as if the whole room existed only to frame this quiet, perfect moment. The night passed in a breath, and then a sound. The clock. Bong, bong. Midnight. Cinderella's gaze shot upward as the realization struck. The magic. It was fading. I must go," she whispered, gently pulling from the prince's hands. "Wait, please." His voice was warm, confused, pleading. But already she was moving, her slippers clicking lightly down the palace steps. Her gown fluttered behind her like a silver ribbon in the wind. The night seemed to stretch and swirl around her, the magic pulling at its seams. And there, just there, on the step, one glass slipper slipped from her foot. She glanced back for the briefest moment but couldn't stop. The carriage, the horses, they were waiting, already shifting, already trembling with the first signs of the spell unraveling. Beneath the silvered moon and the chiming bell, she vanished into the night. Morning sunlight bathed the little cottage in soft gold. Birds sang from the treetops, and the breeze carried the scent of dew-soaked grass. When the prince arrived, slipper in hand, the household was in chaos. The stepsisters fussed and flailed, each trying to force their foot into the delicate shoe. But it was Cinderella who quietly stepped forward. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, her simple dress catching the morning light like spun gold. The prince knelt. Their eyes met, both soft with recognition, as if they had known each other long before a single word was ever spoken. The slipper slid onto her foot as if it had always belonged there. A quiet smile bloomed on both their faces, not of shock but of something deeper. Knowing. A peaceful certainty that the person standing before them was someone they had been waiting for, even without knowing it. The wedding was simple, beautiful, and filled with joy. Not the loud, grand joy of parades and trumpets, but the quiet, enduring kind. The kind felt in laughter shared between friends, in the clasp of hands, in the softness of a vow spoken under breath. Cinderella walked with her prince through a garden bursting with wildflowers. The breeze lifted her veil, sending petals dancing around them like confetti from the earth itself. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling their path in warm gold. From a little hill beneath a flowering tree, the fairy godmother watched, her hands folded, her face peaceful. Her work was done, not because the magic had faded, but because the real magic had always been inside Cinderella herself. And so they lived, not just happily ever after, but gently, kindly, and beautifully ever after.